Welcome to Inside Auto Podcast, where we feature everyone and anyone you'd want to talk to in and out of the automotive industry.
Ilana Shabtai here, host of Inside Auto Podcast, where we interview top dealers, GMs, marketers, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders in and out of the automotive industry. And before we introduce today's guest, this episode is sponsored by AutoLeadStar.com. The AutoLeadStar platform is built on a technology so powerful it allows you to market, sell, and service cars as you would in the real world, online and at scale, making one-to-one matches between shoppers and inventory. AutoLeadStar is the only platform that is powered by scale, speed, and specificity to change the way dealers do marketing today. All right, we have an old friend on the podcast today. Brad Paschal, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing fine. I'm excited for our conversation today. But before we begin, I would like to give you the proper intro because it's quite impressive. Brad here is an 8-year automotive digital marketer. He specializes in creative marketing strategies and problem solving for dealers. He uses his experience on the sales side of the dealership to bring in strategies to the fixed ops side. So we'll be talking a lot about fixed ops today. He is a 2016 DrivingSales Best Idea winner. And he presents at Digital Dealer. I'm sure you've heard him there, DrivingSales, and a lot of other leadership conferences, and of course on webinars. Brad is currently the regional sales director at Fixed Ops Digital. If you listen to our podcast with Owen Moon, he is the CEO of the company. So I'm glad that we've come full circle now, and we have another awesome person from Fixed Ops Digital. So again, thank you so much, Brad, for being here today.
Well, you got Owen on, so that's like little league. I'm glad to bring it up to the majors.
We'll let him know that.
Yeah, I want to make sure that's not edited out either.
That won't be edited out. When you're listening, just know that's how Brad is representing you. No, but before you got into Fixed Ops Digital, you were all over automotive, which is pretty exciting. Can you tell me a little bit about not just what you've done in automotive, but how you got into automotive?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story about how I got into automotive. So I was a training store manager for a company called Lumber Liquidators, and one of the general managers came into our store and bought floors from one of the guys that I trained, and ended up hiring everybody in my store. And so 2 of them went to the Toyota store, and I went to work for John Luciano at the Volkswagen store. And
famous John Luciano.
Yeah, the famous John Luciano. And he had me selling cars and taking pictures of cars. And then I kind of transitioned it. He just told me, hey, you're going to learn this marketing stuff. And so kind of got marketing was kind of thrown upon me, and I kind of fell in love with it. And so I became the e-commerce director over both stores. And I ran that and met my wife. My wife's the BDC manager at the Toyota store. So we're an automotive family. And then I did that Best Idea contest for DrivingSales in 2016. And shortly after that, had a bunch of vendors give me a call, and I moved on to the vendor side in 2017. So I've been on the vendor side for almost 5 years now. So it's really interesting, and you get on that side of things, and you try to always remember what it was like being in the store so that you can relate to people.
Yeah, that's a huge advantage, I think, is being a vendor that came from retail. But if you started, let's say this was the Volkswagen store was 8 years ago, right? At this point. So what did the marketing look like there? Like because obviously we've evolved so much as an industry. What were you kind of doing back then that you think is different from now?
So
was it like building a mobile-friendly website?
Yeah. So back when I first started, Volkswagen was locked into a CDK contract, and it was it wasn't even CDK; it was Cobalt, and their websites were horrible. So as soon as they opened it up, we were able to transition, and the reports were subpar. Kept moving, and then we got hit with the diesel issue, which was 70% of our business. So we decided that, like, John and I had a talk, and we're like, 70% of our business is gone because of the diesel issue. So John, I said, what are you going to do? And he's like, I guess we're going to learn how to sell gas cars. That was his answer. So he's like, figure out how to do that. So John and I came up with like a program where we'll go find any car that you want called Car Catcher. And they still use it today at the dealership, where it's like, we just started advertising that. And then we took a really strong community stance where it was like, we surveyed the employees and we said, hey, what nonprofits or community things are you involved in? And then we created a community impact calendar where we adopted a charity every single month. And we didn't always pour money into it because we didn't have a ton of money as a Volkswagen store, but we'd pour resources, or we'd help them with their marketing, or we'd show them tricks on social media, or we'd do things like that. So we came up with a saying that it's better to be resourceful than to use all your resources.
I like that.
Yeah. So that's kind of the stance that we took on the marketing when the diesel issue hit. And then and we kept saying, hey, it's one brick at a time. Well, now that store sells 250 units and they have about an 18% market share. We're nationwide. Volkswagen's about 2%. So
wow. Yeah, you guys have a great name, great brand. I think as you were leaving, or as I got to know you, you were really heavily involved in social media and building their social media out.
Yeah, and I still go by there. They use us at Fix Ops, and we still throw ideas. Like we just came up with a new idea that they're working on, and they have a really cool referral app called Street Talk that's really interactive.
That's so cute.
Yeah, so it's a really cool referral app, and it does really well for them. It's like you send a referral and they pay out $100 off of Venmo. Like
nice.
as soon as the deal closes, you get $100 through Venmo. So it's like super fast instead of having to pick up a check or send it out. It's super. I mean, I've sent them customers, and John makes me use that. I don't ask for referral, but they make me use the app and stuff like that. But it's super cool. So he's on the cutting edge of a lot of stuff that comes out, which is cool. They do a lot of videos in their service drive and stuff like that. One thing I really love that John does that really impacts the fix up side is that every single sales guy will introduce them to the service advisor. And that's normal, right? That's a normal process that's required. But what he does is a little bit different. He says, hey, Mr. Customer, this is your advisor, Josh. So it's like personalized, like this is your advisor, Josh. And each salesperson has an advisor that they primarily work with, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's more personal where it's like, hey, this is your advisor, Josh. And then when the technicians send the video, when they come in, they say, hey, this is your technician, Leroy.
People almost feel obligated to go there because they have a connection with their staff. Yeah, that's great.
And so it's totally different because you'll have customers come in and one of those guys will be off and they'll be like, no, I'll wait. I want Leroy to work on my car.
Yeah, it totally creates that sense. I love that.
Yeah. So I think that's a beautiful thing. I'm going to do a presentation at Driving Sales of a bunch of tips just like that, where I kind of went out there and asked 15 or 20 people to record me 2-minute videos of fix ops tips, because I think that's something that we don't do is like survey the landscape and the pavement and ask people who are in the trenches about what are some best practices. And I think that's a lot more valuable than me trying to come up with a presentation all on my own and what I think is best. Let me crowdsource that. Yeah, so it should be pretty fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, well, on the flip side, and that transitions me into a question that I wanted us to cover today, is what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see dealers make with their fixed op strategy? Because, at Auto Lead Star, we don't have a full focus on fixed ops, but we definitely try to get into the weeds and understand what our dealers are doing. And we've seen some big mistakes, but we're not the experts. So I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so the biggest thing there's a couple of challenges, right? I wouldn't say they're mistakes, but there's challenges right now in fixed ops, right?
Yeah.
And the two biggest challenges are that I see right now. Number one is that if you have internal work orders going through or repair orders going through the shop, there's not enough bays for customer pay, right? So you're seeing a lot of people take internals offsite, or they'll take them overnight, or they'll do something different. So that's the number one, is that so the business is 642 billion last year,
Wow.
and dealerships captured 12% of that, because we just don't have enough. We don't have, our schedulers are out 2 weeks. So that's one thing. The second thing is technician recruiting. There's not enough technicians out there right now. And independent repair facilities grab a lot of the technicians. And so it's very hard for you to get technicians. And there's not like a farm system right now for technicians. There's nobody going in the schools and recruiting kids to come up and be technicians. So there's two things that are plaguing the industry right now. Now, I've had recent conversations with people that are trying to change that, but those are two of the things. And maybe one more, if I add a third thing, is the service schedulers, right? Like a pro tip would be to take 5 of your customers and invite them to dinner and give them 5 different scenarios for each customer to run through your service scheduler, because service schedulers rely on the consumer to tie their problem to an op code. Well, sometimes they're clunky, and sometimes there's too many op codes in there, and sometimes it's not there's bottlenecks that you don't see because you're either a technician or service manager, and so you know what to select. Well, a lot of times customers don't know what to select when they're going through there. And so sometimes that service scheduler will show 2 weeks out when you're only a week out in the shop, right? So a lot of those service schedulers were shop tools that were never meant to be customer facing. So I think you're going to see a lot of overhaul when it comes to that over the next year.
Interesting. And then do you guys suggest, I heard this recently from someone who was suggesting that dealerships should separate out their Google My Business for service and sales.
Yeah, that's so the guy that wrote the book on Google My Business, right? George Nenny. I mean,
yes, he was the one.
If you don't have his book, it's a dealer's guide to Google My Business. You can get on Amazon. It's like $19, right? It's fantastic.
Yeah, he was on the podcast, and he told us a bit about that. So
yeah, so George, I got to throw some love to him because he's awesome. There's not a lot I can say about Google My Business that he hasn't said, but you definitely want to separate it out into departments. There's even dealerships that have express and collision centers, and there's a way to do that. He also has a really cool Google Chrome extension called GMB Spy.
Yes.
That if you go to the Google Maps, you can bring that up and it'll tell you what categories that a Google My Business has on it. So he has a lot of those categories. Right now, I think there's 23 different categories just for fixed ops. So if you have express and service, you want to try to get as many of those categories as possible. Parts department. But yeah, technically, there's a lady that's an expert on Google My Business. Her name is Joy Hawkins. Technically, if you had let's say you had a Buick GMC Chevy store, right? Technically, you could have a Google My Business for Chevy sales, Buick sales, GMC sales, and parts and service for each one of those, technically. Now, that's a lot to manage, but technically you could have that. So you can have it for up to each department and every brand,
right?
If you wanted to. It's just a lot to manage. So they're really focusing on that. We're working on some cool stuff with GMB that hopefully we'll be able to talk a little bit more about at DrivingSales or towards the later part of the year. But yeah, that's super important because it really affects local search and how you show up there when you add those categories.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to bring that up again because I remember I learned that from George Nenny on the podcast, and I thought that was fascinating. So I'm glad we're emphasizing that on this episode as well, especially now when most dealers are focusing on fixed ops without inventory. That's, I guess, one of their main drivers, although it's always their biggest profit center. So I think now there's just a bigger emphasis on it. Yeah.
You know what's something that a lot of people don't understand, that not right now because things are crazy, right? But 9 times out of 10, your top service advisor outgrosses your top salesperson.
course.
And we don't do a good job of setting them up for success, right? And so that's something I think we gotta put our fixed ops lens on when we're looking at things on the website and marketing and stuff like that too.
Yeah. What's like one or two suggestions that you think we can do better on that in terms of setting them up for success?
Well, if you look at the landscape of the fixed ops side of stuff as a whole, right? The majority of the business that we lose is after the free services are done, right? So after the free services or the maintenance package rolls out, you look at it, it's mostly late model services like transmission fluid exchanges, brake pads, stuff like that. That's where we start to lose business. And I think just from my research, it looks like, when's the last time, let me ask you, what kind of car do you drive?
I'm too embarrassed to tell you.
Oh, come on. Just, you don't have to tell me what year, just what kind.
I drive an Acura RL.
All right. So you drive an Acura. When's the last time you looked in your book for the maintenance schedule?
Literally never. And if you listen to the podcast I did with Owen, I got my oil change at like Oil Star or something like that. And he was like, no.
All right. So 9 out of 10 customers never look at the maintenance schedule.
Yeah.
So
I never do that.
So the biggest thing is that they don't know what to do and when to do it. So we have to take an education stand and say, look, these are the services that we offer, and we have to be like Amazon, right? When you go on Amazon, did you buy something on Prime Day?
I did. What did I buy in Prime Day? Oh, I bought the Bissell vacuum.
All right. So if you go on to Amazon and you search for vacuum, right, or Bissell vacuum, there's going to be a search results page that shows you all of the Bissell vacuums, right?
Yep.
And you click on that Bissell vacuum, and it has a product detail page, very similar to a VDP page, right?
Yep.
So you wonder where we got the SRP VDP relationship. We got it from Amazon. So what we suggest is like a service menu page that tells all the services with transparent pricing. You can find out everything about that vacuum on that product detail page, right?
Yeah, I love that.
What we suggest is a service menu page, and then what we call a service detail page if you need to drill down in the services. And the two most important pieces of information that most dealerships are missing is when all of the services are recommended and how much they cost.
I like that.
So people want transparency, and the transparency wave is just now coming over the fix up side of stuff.
Yeah.
And so by providing that transparency, what you see is you start to grab some of those late model services, and the older the car gets, the more problems you have, right? So you start to eliminate one-line ROs, and your average dollars per RO go up because just by providing education and a format that they're used to. So yeah.
I like that. We focus way too much on the sales side of marketing for dealers, and it really is important to set that infrastructure up so that service can be even more successful than it already is. Fixed ops for dealers.
Yeah, and there's websites that you're gonna, when I say this, you're gonna laugh. There's websites that their default call to action on service specials is print coupon.
Yeah, no, I actually saw that. Right?
And 70% of the traffic, 70% of your service traffic comes from mobile. Okay, 58% of your traffic comes from Google My Business on service side of stuff. So we're sending them to the thing to say print coupon, and they're on their mobile phone. They can't print the coupon from there.
Yeah, it should totally be like QR code.
Yeah, we do Apple Wallet or Android Wallet. Yeah, so and then that opens you up to push notifications, right? When they save those on those.
Yeah.
So, but it's so funny that they do that kind of stuff. So it's just one of those things to where, we're getting there on the sales side, but we really need to focus on user experience click funnel style, Amazon click funnel style arrangement on the service side of stuff.
Totally.
And then, another problem that we run into pretty often is OEMs pushing like duplicate content pages. So we have solutions for that where we can hide those OEM pages from the sitemap so Google doesn't crawl them and you don't get counted off for them.
So. Oh, that's really smart.
Yeah.
Okay, now before we sign off, this has been an awesome conversation. I want to get the opportunity for you to tell us all why we can always find you in a hat. And I know you write about this sometimes, but I want to make room for it in the podcast because I think it's your personal brand and you're here representing yourself. So I'd love to, if you could share it with us and then we'll.
So you're gonna, you threw me a curveball. I wasn't expecting that. That's funny. All right. So we've been friends a long time. So when I got into the automotive industry, right, I was thinking about how to brand myself. And whenever you're thinking about how to brand yourself, it still has to be branded towards your unique self, right? You can't be a different person online and offline, and you can't flip-flop back and forth. I feel like branding has to be authentic, and I felt like branding has to be a part of like who you are and a part of your DNA, right? It can't change from time to time. So I thought about my childhood and I really thought about it really seriously. And I went back, and when I first started in automotive, believe it or not, back then I had hair and there might even be a picture of this. It's like 3 inches long and it's spiky. And my Mr. Street came in and saw me, and he did not like my hair. And he said, a hat's free for that guy. That's what he told John. And so ever since that happened, I went and did that. And then I started wearing a hat and a polo with my name on it and everything, and that became my stick. And then at a conference, there was a guy that worked for a big agency that started giving me a hard time about why I wore a hat, and told me that he wouldn't go to dinner with me if I had that hat on. And so I was like, I'm a gentleman. I take it off when we go to dinner and stuff like that. But he was giving me a hard time. So I wrote a little thing about why I wear a hat. And so it's pretty much says like the simple answer is that I really just I like baseball caps. And I grew up working for my dad, who was a plumber, and a hat was like the tool that you wore, right?
Yeah.
And so it kept the sweat out of your eyes. It protected your head when you were crawling under houses. It displayed your logo and your profession. And it was to show his respect when you handed one out to a customer. So like old school grassroots type marketing, right?
Yeah.
And it was just as important as like a lawyer in his briefcase or a professor at the podium. And the hat reminds me, it reminds me to work hard, all the integrity lessons that my dad taught me, that my word is my bond, I always utilize the tools that I have. It keeps me grounded and humble, and it helps remember my roots. It has also transformed my brand when I go to places, and it makes me memorable. So I feel more approachable and on the same level as my clients, and that's why I wear it, is because it lowers the bar whenever you're talking to someone for some reason. And maybe it's a combination of accent, and maybe it's a combination of where I'm from, but it lowers the bar. And so it puts me at a place to where I can really connect with people. And one thing that it does for me that a lot of people don't understand is there's a lot of big speakers out there that have something called a psychological anchor. So it's an act that they do before they go on stage. UFC fighters have it before they go into the ring. Mm-hmm. They have different baseball players have, Sammy Sosa has his famous thing before he goes up to bat. Well, my hat's my psychological anchor to go to work, right? So when I put it on, I'm in a different mode. When I take it off, I'm in a different mode, right? And so that's what it is. So I have psychological anchors to help me with different things and to switch my brain into different modes. And I think that's important in the sales process. And I think that's important throughout life to have those things set up. So that's it.
What a beautiful way for us to end this podcast. I love that. I think it's really important to consider just like being humbled and remembering where you come from. I mean, at least in, obviously in Judaism, we have that because we have men wear yarmulkes, and it's like a very similar reason to why you wear hats. So I love that. It's like remembering your roots, remembering where you're from. Thanks for sharing that with us, and thanks for all of your insight today. For those of you who liked this episode, tune in Inside Auto Podcast. You can find us on all mainstream outlets, but also InsideAutoPodcast.com. Thank you again, Brad.
Yep, absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was fun catching up.
Thanks for listening to Inside Auto Podcast. Check out our other episodes with top entrepreneurs and industry leaders.